Hi. My name's Robert Hibbs. I'm the Bishop Suffragan of the Episcopal Diocese of West Texas. I resigned my jurisdiction as Bishop Suffragan when I reached the canonically mandated age of 72. Prior to being ordained bishop, I had served as a parish priest in a number of congregations, both rural and urban, in the state of Texas. And before coming to Texas, I had been for 15 years in the Philippines as an academician serving on the faculty of St. Andrew's Theological Seminary in Quezon City, serving as a professor of moral theology. And then for my sins, I got appointed subdean and subsequently dean of that institution. I looked at the record of the General Convention of the Episcopal Church, and I got back as far as 1959, and then I ran out of steam. But since 1959, the Episcopal Church has had a consistent policy of opposition to the death penalty, enunciated at successive General Conventions since that year. During years of General Convention in which I was privileged to serve as a member of the House of Deputies, General Convention is a bilateral institution, and latterly as a member of the House of Bishops, I was happy to affirm with significant majorities, and now I'm quoting a typical utterance from the General Convention. The General Convention urged provinces, dioceses, parishes, missions, and individual members of this church to engage in serious study on the subject of capital punishment and worked actively to abolish the death penalty in their states. So there's never been any dissonance between my own position and that of the Episcopal Church on this issue. Having said that, the formation of my own personal opposition to the death penalty was nurtured by long evening conversations during the time when I was an undergraduate, when I was a seminarian, and subsequently as a ordained graduate student with no less than my late father-in-law, Merle Alexander. And he was a distinguished former director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons under the late Robert Kennedy, who was the Attorney General at the time. And Dad was also a United Nations consultant on crime and corrections, and towards the end of his active career, university professor at Southern Illinois University and the University of Florida. And sometimes, to the despair of my future mother-in-law and my wife, who was turned out to be my wife, Dad Alexander and I would sit up late at night, perhaps consuming a little scotch, and just go round and round and round about death penalty. Dad was an experienced, informed, and outspoken opponent of the death penalty. And it was with him in these night watches that I undertook to examine the issues of justification of the death penalty, rehabilitation. I'll never forget one night we were talking about, if you put somebody to death, that pretty well knocks out the possibility of rehabilitation. And then Dad just broke out and he said, and now I'm quoting him, remember he's distinguished, Hell, he said, most of the people I know don't need to be rehabilitated. They've never been habilitated in the first place. Retribution, prevention of capital crime, deterrence, the significant issues of addiction, discrimination, the economics of long-term incarceration versus lengthy appeal processes, and the very significant issue of access to competent legal representation. Now, long years ago, I was ordained, I was a priest, and I was put in contact with a young man in Austin, Texas, whose sister had been sexually abused and tormented and then thrown into Lake Austin. And her battered body on the autopsy table revealed that she had died by drowning. And I met her brother on the night he was raging against the two young men who had been arrested and charged with this murder. His intent that night was to commit a crime so that he would be arrested and have an opportunity perhaps to attack. And what he wanted to do was kill those perpetrators. He was sort of handed off to me, and somebody said, Bob, do what you can to deliver this man from his rage, his hatred. We would walk along the riverbank there in Austin. And one day, while we were walking along, two little boys were kicking a soccer ball. They were real youngsters, maybe like 6, 7, something like that. They happened to belong to the same ethnic minority as the two men who had killed his sister. One of the little curly-headed kids kicked the ball, and it rolled up to the feet of my now friend. And he picked it up, and he threw it back to the youngster. And then I said to him, I said, what do you suppose it would take to turn a child like that into the men who tormented and killed your sister? And he wept, and he began to heal. As a consequence of these discussions, together with my own experience both here and abroad, I am persuaded that there is no morally justifiable defense for the death penalty, and that its continuance among us is itself ethically and spiritually reprehensible.